All right, inshallah, let's go ahead and begin. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, as-salatu was-salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Hope everybody is doing well, alhamdulillah. Hope everyone is dealing with the crash out weather in Dallas that we're experiencing right now. Everyone's just super excited about the 90s, and then all of a sudden this week, alhamdulillah, it was just a little bit intense. But alhamdulillah, inshallah, we're going to be continuing on with the conversation that we started last Thursday. Um, and there are certain stories in our tradition that really warrant a little bit of time just because of how special and unique those lessons really are. And alhamdulillah, one of the lessons that we began last week was the lesson from the story of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. And Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, last week we were kind of more so divulging into the parts of his life that dealt with the challenges of things like temptation and desire and how he handled those things as a young man, right? I think it's very important to be able to address that particular context that Yusuf alayhi salam was not like an elderly person. He was not like a known prophet, at that time. Rather, he was kind of this young man. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that he reached the age of maturity. And so he dealt with all of those challenges at that time. But the thesis of last Thursday was that if a person is good in their private affairs, Allah Azza wa Jal will take care of them in their public affairs, right? And I spoke a little bit last week about the challenge nowadays, which is the opposite of that, right? A lot of us, when we're kind of operating in our lives, we're operating with the idea of I'm good publicly with everybody around me, but then privately, I have my own skeletons in my closet, right? I have my own demons. And although it's okay to have those issues privately, it's totally understandable. In fact, it's very good to privately struggle with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The principle that we're trying to teach here is that for a Muslim to have this idea that as long as I'm okay in the eyes of the public, then everything else is okay. This is a very, very problematic mindset, right? Because a person should strive more so for inner tranquility than the outside perspective of other people, right? And this is why, subhanAllah, we always believe in this principle that if a person is good and content within, it doesn't matter what the exterior public facing the public facing reactions are of their community or the people around them, because they're personally good with Allah. But if the opposite is true, where a person is good with the public eye, right? They have public approval by people, their friends, their social life, their community, but then internally, in terms of their own contentment with Allah, they're struggling. This is where a person never feels that level of fulfillment ever in their deen, which is always a problematic feeling. This causes people to go home at night and not feel happy with their lives. They don't feel fulfilled with what they're doing throughout a day, right? They can have the glitz and the glamour for a period of time when they're seeing other people, but when you're by yourself, that person's very unokay with who they are. So we're trying to kind of get away from that tradition. And so Yusuf alayhi salam's early on story teaches us this. Now, today, I wanted to kind of round off that conversation and keep it on Prophet Yusuf, but a very, very, very particular moment that happened in the later part of his life, which is obviously the grand kind of theme of his life began with the entire jealousy of his brothers towards him, right? And this caused quite literally the entire ordeal of him being split away from his own father and being raised by, a very wealthy man and a woman in Egypt. And then eventually, we talked about this last week, he was put in prison. And then from that moment in prison, he interpreted a dream properly of the king of that area at that time. And then Yusuf alayhi salam at that moment was given clearance to be one of the people or one of the workers that managed the money of the wealth of the king, right? And that was a very big step in his life. And so now we fast forward to this particular part of the story, which is how interestingly, subhanAllah, the qadr of Allah takes place, right? You guys ever heard the phrase, what goes around comes around, right? And this is why it's so important to make sure that you treat people properly, because you never know where those people will be in a few years. And not saying that you should treat people well because of your own fear, but you should always treat people well because you don't know who that person may be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a very important principle, by the way, right? We tend to kind of like make jokes and mock and belittle and, maybe perhaps at the expense of other people, kind of have like a small moment of comedy or whatever to make our own selves feel better. But we don't actually realize that that person may be closer to Allah than we ever will be. And so to kind of do something at the expense of that person is now to gain the disappointment of God. And that's a very big deal to a Muslim, right? We don't ever do that. And this is why, subhanAllah, we get over and over again the principles from the life of the Messenger ﷺ of the Quraysh who used to abuse and harm and assault him. And they didn't even realize what they're doing. They're doing this to a prophet of God. And that's a very huge infraction. And so the brothers of Yusuf, when they decided to kind of get rid of him and throw him down a well when he was a child, they didn't realize that who they were messing with was a prophet of Allah. And although he was a young kid at that time, they didn't understand that this young boy will grow up to be one of the greatest messengers that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give this world. And so years and years later, after Yusuf alayhi salam is taken out of prison, and he's in this very authoritarian position in his life, right? And I want you guys to think about this. There's a very interesting human experience that a lot of people go through where when you come from nothing, or you're given a lot of trials and tribulations, and perhaps there are certain people along the way that kind of poked the fire, right? Almost like kindled the fire a little bit, or maybe they were not your greatest fans along the way. When you reach that ultimate status in your life of a person who Allah took care of, and Allah gave them blessings upon blessings, right? And you had your haters back in the day, it's very tempting for the human being to look at their haters with a sense of disdain and a sense of cynicism. They're like, oh, look at these people, right? Didn't believe me back then, didn't trust me back then, made fun of me back then, hated me back then, right? All those kind of memories come flooding back to the human mind. And at this point, the Muslim has a very interesting decision to make. And the decision is, am I going to pacify those nafsi feelings that I have, right? Like getting that last word in an argument. You know what I'm talking about? Like you go back and forth with your sister, your brother, your whoever, your friend, and that person kind of like, I was just watching this video, like so funny. My siblings, by the way, it's interesting. You guys think that you guys all have different algorithms than me? Guess again. My siblings and I, we always like exchange these videos once in a while of like just kind of like what we go through, and we're all kind of living the same life somewhere or the other. And it's like that one time where like, a person who says like, oh, you do this all the time. And then you have that one person like, tell me, give me an example. And then at that moment when you told, like, give me an example, you completely go like you have no idea. You can't bring up one good example. But then imagine the feeling of like when you do make, like, you kind of think of that example, like you want to finish that argument and get them back. Like you'll text them at 2 a.m. with that example. Be like, hey, I know you're asleep right now, but I got an example for you, right? And that person's like forgotten about what they were talking to you about 4 days ago. But you've been thinking about it so much that your goal now is to not even have a fruitful conversation, but it's to kind of get at them. You see what I'm saying? So at this moment, Yusuf alayhi salam is no longer this young child. He's no longer this kind of, a lot of people earlier on in his life have this kind of pity. He was taken away from his father, this, that, all that stuff. But now he's like this middle-aged man, an older human being who, mashallah, is in charge of a huge responsibility, and most likely we can assume is being compensated very well for his work, okay? And now Allah Ta'ala flips the script with difficulty that has hit his family. So his brothers, and by extension, his own father, who is a prophet of Allah, Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam, who is, by the way, we don't really understand, and I guarantee people who are not parents will not understand the grief that parents go through unless you're a parent yourself, okay? And again, I'm not saying this from a position of like talking down, because I was a lot of people in here until 3 years ago, until Allah gave me my first child. And then I realized, subhanAllah, all those kind of tales you hear about, right? Oh, no, you're not going to understand until you become a mom. You're not going to understand until you become a dad. I get it. I'm a girl dad, okay? It's the only kid I know is my daughter, okay? And I remember one time, one of my good friends, Sheikh Mubin, mashallah, he has like 5 daughters, like 4 daughters or something. And Sheikh Mubin was like one time back, when my wife was expecting, he told me, he goes, he goes, Ustad, you're going to really understand what it feels like to be a father of girls once you have her, because you'll be completely okay going to jail for her. I said, huh? That's a crazy statement. What are you talking about? And then I thought about it today. I was like, and I saw this video of like a kid getting bullied on the internet. And I was like, bro, 100% lock me up. If I was that kid's parent, like, wallahi, man, 5 to 10 years easy, right? Like, subhanAllah. So when you think about the story of Yusuf, and you're thinking it from the perspective of Yusuf, it's one thing, right? You're thinking of it from like a perspective of a son, the protagonist that's going through that entire ordeal. But then from the kind of like the background, you start appreciating the story from the perspective of a father who, subhanAllah, missed decades of his son's life. Decades. Y'all ever watch that scene from Interstellar where Matthew McConaughey is looking at the videos of like his kids just growing up without him? Like, wallahi, I know y'all cried. Like, I know y'all cried. It's tough. That is tough. To see years go by and missing years. Your kid grew up, right? Like, got married, had a kid, grew old. Like, and subhanAllah, that's a heartbreaker of a scene, right? But subhanAllah, when you look at it in real time in the Quran, and you think about Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam, what he must have been feeling, try to empathize with a father there, right? You're missing your son for decades. What must he be going through? And it's not like nowadays where you can call and you can ask, hey, how are you? Let's FaceTime, let's catch up. He just had to completely, blindly trust Allah that Allah's taking care of his child, okay? And at this moment, Prophet Yaqub's family is going through a famine. They're going through difficulty. And the brothers of Yusuf, they are going to the king's court. And they're going to the king to beg for rations of food, okay? And who's in charge of the wealth and the rationing of the resources of that time is Yusuf alayhi salam. But they didn't recognize him, okay? But he recognized them right away. He knew right away, okay? And I'll tell you something, subhanAllah, right? Something that's interesting. Some of us, right, we're people who like beat people to the punchline of a joke before they're even to ask you like what. Because you get so excited, right? You want that like nafsi feeling, okay? But I want to tell you something about prophets of Allah. The Anbiya of Allah, alayhim salam, they are not given permission to do certain things spiritually by anyone except bi'idhnillah, except by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, okay? Even something as great, and most of you know about this, the migration of the Prophet Muhammad from Mecca to Medina was not something that the Prophet he made a decision on by himself. That decision was something that he was given to by Allah. And that's when he decided to move his community from Mecca to Medina. Why? Because Islam would not have flourished in Mecca at that time like it would in Medina, and now obviously we know what it is today, right? But that decision was Allah's decision. So now you think about Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam and you're like, dude, if you had your brothers who like basically tried to murder you like 30, 40 years ago, and the first moment that they come to you and they're like, oh, great, treasurer of the king, we need food, we need sustenance, we need rations. Wouldn't you be the first person to be like, ha, got you, right? Like, I knew Allah would make you come to me at one point in my life, and I knew Allah would put me in a position of power over you. Like, there's so many people who would exercise that power because they literally yearn for it. They yearn for the moment where they can get somebody back. People live for this stuff, by the way, right? We live for that moment where you can finally tell somebody, yes, I told you, right? I told you so. I told you I was right. I told you you were wrong. But Allah told Yusuf, not now. Not now. You're not going to disclose to them who you are right now. You're going to exercise patience. Why? Because the timing of Allah will always be better than your timing. The timing of Allah will always be better than your timing. I want you to think about it in your own life. There have been moments in your own personal life where you wanted certain things and you wanted them when you wanted them. Okay? You wanted to live in a certain place now. You wanted to go to that certain school now. You wanted to get that degree now. You wanted to have that person in your life now. You wanted this now. There's so many things that you wanted at certain times in your life, and if you had it your way, I guarantee you this right now, if you wanted everything your own way, you would go back in your life and rewrite history. If you wanted everything your way. But Allah's timing is different than yours. Why? وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ, because Allah is the one who swears by time because He made it. Allah is the one that made it. So the one who made the concept, don't we think that it's better for Him to dictate the concept that He created instead of us? We, just like time, are makhluk. What I mean by that is that we're both creations. Time and humanity are both creations of Allah. We exist in unison, okay? We didn't make time, time didn't make us, but we both have to deal with each other. Allah is the one who created both of us. So sometimes, to kind of give you a bitter pill to swallow, Allah will tell you, hey, I know that you want to graduate in like 4 years from UTD, but guess what? You're going to go there for like 3 years, you're going to go to like UNT for another year, you're going to go to Colin for a year, then you're going to go, and you're like, Allah, why? Like, I'm a failure. Like, why did you, my family's all mad at me and this and that, all that stuff. And yeah, sometimes it's tough. Sometimes it's difficult. Some of you all are on the realm of like, your mom's coming to you once in a while, like, so beta, you know, marriage, what's happening here, right? And you're like, Mom, I'm 22, right? Like, I don't even know my left shoe from my right shoe yet. Like, I don't, marriage. And again, sometimes like there's these timelines that we abide by. But subhanAllah, at the end of the day, I will tell you this from a person who may be a little bit older than you, is that you have to trust in Allah's time. Allah will make you wait for certain things, and He will give it to you at the exact moment, at its perfect moment. Why? Because that is when it's best for it to happen. There are certain people, subhanAllah, who have trouble with very huge things in life, having children, right? In an ideal world, they like to have children when they're younger. And Allah tested them for years and years and years. And they had their first child when they were in their late 30s. And at that moment, subhanAllah, we could call it and say, well, why? I was younger before. I had more energy before. I may have had a better living before. Now I'm older. I'm more tired. How is that fair now? But look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Ibrahim alayhi salam. Look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Zakaria alayhi salam. These are anbiya alayhum salam. And Allah gave them children when they were old in their life. Why? Because at that stage, you will be the best father to your kids. And maybe you all are in the same realm. You're having a hard time. Maybe you're a fresh grad and you're not getting a job right away. You've been in like the job hunting market for the past 10 months, 12 months, for the past year. And you're wondering, hey, was that degree worth it? I went to school for 5, 6 years, 7 years. I'm still having trouble finding a job. Is it worth it? Was all that studying worth it? Guess what? Maybe when you do get your job, you will be the greatest employee that person has ever employed. Because you understand the process of waiting and appreciation. Sometimes people that get things right away, they have a lack of shukr in their life. Perhaps, right? They got it right away. They didn't understand that struggle. They didn't get it. Like some of y'all remember your high school days? I didn't get a car, by the way, until I was in college because I needed it. My university was 30 miles away. Like in high school, I remember sometimes I would be like this junior, senior, like getting rides from my friends. And some people were like driving like their mom's Lexus. And I was like, what? Like Lexus? My parents don't even have Lexus. Like, what are you talking about? There's like a brand new like Lexus, whatever, like RX. And I'm like, you're driving this? It's crazy. But subhanAllah, and I was over here driving my 1998 Nissan Altima that would just stop in the middle of the parking lot. It had like a mind of its own, like that car from Harry Potter, like drove into the Forbidden Forest once in a while. And I'm just like, what? Like, subhanAllah, why? But then I realized, man, when I was able to get my first car that I bought with my own money, I took care of my mother was like, well, so you took care of that thing better than anything else in your life. I was like, what? Because I appreciated it, right? So the process is important, okay? And so Yusuf alayhi salam at this moment, he's approached by his siblings, by his brothers, and long story short, we're going to get to these verses now, is that the first time they came twice. The first time they came with just them, but they were missing their youngest brother, Benjamin. So Prophet Yusuf, he knew that they had a younger brother named Benjamin, but they didn't obviously recognize him. So he said, why don't you come back with your younger brother? And so they did. They came back a second time. They came back with Benjamin. Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam has this plan that's devised where he basically puts the cup, the goblet of the king that he works for in Benjamin's bag. And he tells the workers of the kingdom, he says, check all their bags, almost like a TSA, like a security check, right? Like if you find something in your bag that you're guilty of, we're going to confiscate it and we're going to keep you here until we figure out what you did, right? So Benjamin's bag was filled with the cup of the king. And so Benjamin now was held back with Yusuf. And the brothers are like now panicking. They're like, we can't go back to our dad and tell them that now we lost 2 brothers, right? Like, what are we going to do now? So Yusuf, he said, no, go tell your father. Go tell your father what happened. And so they go back and they tell their father. And now, subhanAllah, you see in this line of the Quran, I'm going to kind of make it a little bit bigger for everyone to be able to see the Arabic as well, because the Arabic is so beautiful. This is the line that the father of Yusuf alayhi salam, Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam, he shares, that is something that I want you guys to etch in your minds. قَالَ إِنَّمَا أَشْكُ بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. He says something powerful. He says, I plead my grief and sorrow to Allah and Allah alone. This is the ultimate, subhanallah, it is an ultimate evidence of a believer. That ultimately, when everything is done, when you put your head to rest on a pillow at night, when you put your phone down, you got to charge it, it's away from you. When you got to like put your phone on do not disturb, when you close the door, when your family's asleep, when everyone else is asleep, قَالَ إِنَّمَا أَشْكُ بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. I turn to Allah. Because Allah is my first and Allah is my last. Allah is how I begin my day and Allah is how I end my day. If I begin and end my day with temporary things, I will never feel content with my life. If I begin my day with, I don't know, something that is negligent of my fajr, and if I end my day with something that is negligent of my isha or my dhikr before I go to sleep, I'm never going to feel that sense of fulfillment in this dunya. Why? Because I'm living my life by the temporary. But Yaqub, he says to his sons, when now not only he lost Yusuf, but now Benjamin is being held back, and he says, I only turn to Allah of my grief and my sorrow. And he says, وَأَعْلَمُ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. He says, I have knowledge from Allah that you do not have. Meaning that he knows deep down that his sons did something that was a little bit immoral with Yusuf back in the day. He knows deep down. He's a prophet of God. Prophets of Allah, by the way, guys, are not people that you can fool. They are intelligent beings. They know what happened. They know what happens. And at this moment, he tells them, Ya bunayya, go back to the kingdom. Go back to the king's palace, okay? And go seek news of Yusuf and his brother, and do not despair of Allah's mercy, okay? Only people who are disbelievers despair of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's love and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's forgiveness. So go back. And at this moment, this is the third and last time they go back to Yusuf alayhi salam, and they say, "Oh Yusuf," they go back to, and they don't know his name. They go back to him and they say, "Ya ayyuhal aziz." They call him Aziz, which means like a master, like a minister. So they don't know it's Yusuf. They say, "Ya ayyuhal aziz, massana wa ahlana dhurru." Our family has been afflicted with a lot of difficulty, a lot of challenges, and we have brought only a little bit of merchandise, but give us something that we can take back to our family. And they're telling him, be generous. وَتَصَدَّقْ عَلَيْنَا. Be charitable to us, O Aziz. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَجْزِي الْمُتَصَدِّقِينَ. Allah gives a lot of reward to those who are generous. So they're basically begging. They're begging this Aziz, who we know as Yusuf, and they are at their lowest point. They're begging. Perhaps this is why Allah told Yusuf not to disclose his identity yet. Maybe Allah wanted them to get to the lowest of the low. Asfal safirin, right? As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that when you're at the lowest of your lows, right? Because perhaps if the first time they came, Yusuf told them who he was, they wouldn't have appreciated it. Maybe even the second time. Now the third and last time, they're literally begging to Yusuf alayhi salam. We have been afflicted. Our family is falling apart. We now lost our brother. Be charitable to us, O Aziz. In fact, they say, Allah rewards those who are mutasaddiqeen, those who are charitable. And now Yusuf alayhi salam says something interesting. In verse number 89. قال هل علمتم ما فعلتم بيوسف وأخيه إذ أنتم جاهلون. He asked them the question, the $1,000,000 question. He says, do you now realize? قال هل علمتم ما فعلتم. Do you now realize what you did? Do you know now what you did to Yusuf and his brother when you were إذ أنتم جاهلون? In a moment of jahala. And I told you guys what jahala means, by the way. Jahala doesn't mean disbelief. Jahala means a moment in which you let yourself get to yourself. In a moment where you let your animalistic nature get to you. When you acted out of anger, when you acted out of grief, when you acted out of extreme joy, when you acted out of excitement, elation, you did something. Jealousy in this case, right? Do you realize what you did? And now at that moment, they're shocked. How does he know? How does he know about Yusuf? How does he know about wa akhihi? How does he know about his brother? How does he know about all this stuff? And so they say, قالوا أئنك لا أنت يوسف? Are you Yusuf? And he says, أنا Yusuf وهذا أخي. He says, I'm Yusuf and this is my brother, pointing to Benjamin. Benjamin, by the way, was Yusuf's only younger brother. Okay? All the other brothers that Yusuf had were older than him. And so sometimes, when siblings are like kind of traumatized together, they stick together, right? Sometimes, when there's like abusive situations, a'udhu billah, may Allah ta'ala protect us. Everyone say ameen. But whenever there's any hard, difficult, circumstance, people find solace in companionship. Which is why companionship is important, by the way, right? The Prophet ﷺ would talk about this, that, and I mentioned this hadith to you guys before. I remember this particularly several times where the Prophet ﷺ, he used to say that solitude is better than bad companionship, but good companionship is better than solitude. Okay? So if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're trying to play that equation, ask yourself where you lie. If you have a chance to be in good company, don't make yourself be by yourself all the time. And if you have a chance to be in bad company, know that it's better for you to be by yourself. Yes? And so he says, I'm Yusuf, wa hadha akhi. And he says, manna Allahu alayna. He says, Allah has been gracious to us. Okay? He says, innahu man yattaqi wa yasbir. He says, and God does not deny anyone who is mindful of Allah and steadfast. Wa yasbir. Fa inna Allah la yudi'u ajra al-muhsinin. What a powerful line. He says, this is me, Yusuf, and this is my brother. Allah does not deny anyone who is a muttaqi, a person who's conscious of him, and wa yasbir, and a person who's patient. Wa inna Allah la yudhi'u ajra al-muhsinin. And Allah will never allow the reward of people who do good in their life to ever be lost. It's a powerful line in the Quran, by the way. I want everyone to, by the way, when I read this line for the first time in my life, and this is before I even knew Arabic or anything, I remember I saw this translation and I literally pulled out like a note card and I wrote it with a Sharpie and I literally magnetized it to my refrigerator at home. That God does not allow the reward of a person who does good to be lost. Isn't this like the solution and the medicine to so many dunyawi questions? Everybody asks, man, was all that for nothing? Don't we do that sometimes as human beings? Like, what was the point of that suffering? What was the point of me telling the truth? What was the point of me having patience at that moment? What was the point of me turning the other cheek at that moment where I could have squared up with that person? What was the point of that? The point is, وَلَا نُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Allah will not allow your reward to be lost. Remember that. Because you think because you don't see it right now that it's gone. You think because you don't get the reward right away that it's not there. But there are certain ayat in the Quran that will teach you that their reward, lahum ajruhum, right? Their reward will be with Allah. For them, their reward will be with God. And you have to believe in that. Because if you believe that I should be rewarded for every moment of suffering, every moment of patience, every moment of turning the other cheek right now, you'll never be satisfied with anything that Allah has to give you. How many times do you ever get exactly what you want when you want it? And sometimes when those happen, by the way, those moments, they kind of leave, and I'll be honest with you guys, it leaves a weird taste in your mouth. Like you get right what you want when you want it. Don't you guys sometimes feel that like there's something wrong here? You're like, what's the catch, right? Like I interviewed for that job and they called me right away when I was driving back home. Why are you so desperate, right? Like there's something off about this. And there's truth to this, by the way, that things that are worth it in life are worth waiting for, right? They're worth struggling for. Look at, subhanAllah, when you look at the situation in Palestine, in Gaza, right? Again, what are we asking Allah for? We're asking Allah for afiyah. We're asking Allah for afiyah now. Like we want it now. But sometimes, and this is qadr Allah, and this is by the permission of Allah, that certain situations are being shown to the world, right? We just, by the way, had a conversation. I had a conversation with a few people in my own family just a few weeks ago about just kind of like the adab of how we're supposed to be operating as people living in the West right now in terms of like our social media and posting things and sharing like what your meal is and where you went out of town at and this and that, all that stuff, what wedding you went to and like what dolki it was and like all that stuff. And hey, guess what? Perhaps right now for you, it's better not to post any of that stuff. Be sensitive. How can you look at a picture of a malnourished 6-month-old? How can you look at a picture of a malnourished 1-year-old who passed away? They're bringing a janazah over a 1-year-old that weighs barely 10 pounds. It's all bones. How can you look at that image and then just swipe and be like, well, this is the wedding that I went to in California the other week? I mean, it's just weird. It's weird. It makes the heart feel strange. And so perhaps, subhanAllah, perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us this idea, be conscious, be patient. These people's reward will be given to them. And there's a lesson in all of that. And so Yusuf alayhi salam, he tells them that our reward is not lost. You thought for 30 years after you threw me down a well, 40 years, 50 years after you threw me down a well, that you got away with it? Look at me now. Right? And I'll share this right now in the next ayah. In no way is he gloating. Because look, they respond. Their response to Yusuf, قالوا تالله لقد آثرك الله علينا وإن كنا لخاطئين. They say to him, by Allah, God really did favor you over us. وإن كنا لخاطئين. And indeed, we were the ones that were sinful. So they're admitting guilt. They're saying, yeah, you got us. SubhanAllah, like, we were wrong. Clearly, Allah loves you. We thought that you were gone. We thought that you were done for. We left a 6-year-old in a well. What's like the likelihood of survival in that logistical or that logical situation? 0, probably 0.01. So clearly, Allah loves you. And at this moment, he said something powerful, and I want you guys to write this down. Really, I want you guys to jot this verse down. Verse number 92. قال لا تثريب عليكم اليوم. The first thing he says is so powerful. He says, لا تثريب عليكم اليوم. He says, there will be no reproach or punishment for you today. There will be no revenge today. There will be no avenging, the past 40 years today. I'm not going to punish you today. And then he says, يَغْفِرُ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ وَهُوَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. He says, may Allah be the one that forgives you. Because وَهُوَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. Because he's the most merciful. I'll tell you guys, by the way, why this line is exponentially powerful. Number one, Yusuf alayhi salam decides at a moment of immense authority to forgive people who he could have easily punished. This, by the way, in terms of spiritual nature, is the greatest form of power, strength, quwwah. This is why we call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Qawiyul Aziz. He is the most powerful and the most mighty. Why? Because Allah continues to forgive those who He has all authority to punish every single day. Allah continues to allow us, people who continuously make mistakes, continuously make wrong decisions, continuously choose something over Him every day of our lives. And He continues to say, no, it's okay. Wake up tomorrow. Go to sleep tonight. Have a meal with your family. Go out and enjoy your life. Continuously. This is what power really is. And of course, no one will ever be anywhere near the quwwah, the strength of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what we can do is reflect a little bit of that in our daily life. When you have a moment to exercise some sort of strength over another person, can you find it in yourself to find true strength and say, I forgive you? That forgiveness, by the way, is nothing other than a miraculous blessing that Allah has given certain people. And if you look at the seerah of the Messenger ﷺ, you'll find it almost in every chapter. People who have abused him, harmed his family, mocked him and his community are the same people that he said, you can live with us. Don't worry about anything. Just live with us here. You're good. It has fascinated people who have studied history for centuries. How can a person who was abused and harmed and kicked out of his own home city come back and tell people, hey, you can live here with us. Just don't oppose what we believe in. There's no one in human history that's ever done anything like that before, except our Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in your own life, think about where this can be applicable for you. Is there a person in your life that caused you some sort of harm, caused you some sort of pain? And again, not saying that you have to be buddy-buddy with them. Not saying that you have to just kind of brush and let bygones be bygones and go grab a matcha with them in 5 minutes. Like, that's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is, can you go to sleep at night and say, hey, you know what? I have forgiven this person and I don't want that weight on my shoulder anymore. I want to be able to go to sleep at night without that weight sitting on my chest. It's a heavy pain. It's a heavy burden that we carry. So he says, لا تثريب عليكم اليوم. He exercises his strength in the moment when it matters the most. Number 2 is يغفر الله لكم. He encourages them to actually make right with Allah, because that's what actually matters. That's what actually matters. Yes, sure, you wronged me. Yes, you did. You wronged me. You wronged me as a person, human being to human being. You wronged me. Yes? And I'll draw that analogy again. When a human being harms another human being, you harmed a creation of Allah as a creation of Allah. But why do you need to seek Allah's forgiveness? Because you harming me, we are creation versus creation. The one who you need to seek forgiveness from is the one who created me. And I'll give you a very bad example, but I need you to follow with me because it might be actually a not so bad example. When a person harms, let's say unintentionally, even a child, right? Let's say like you ran into a kid at the store. You know, you're a big person, you're a grown adult, you're a target walking around, you run into like a 4-year-old who's like running crazy in the aisles, right? And that kid, falls. And you say sorry to that kid. Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't see you. Are you okay? Like, what's your name? Like, you kind of like try to like soothe and pacify the kid. But what do you do when you see that parent? I'm so sorry, right? Because that parent might beat you up in a second. You ran into my kid? You turn to the parent and you say, I'm so sorry. I was a complete accident. I didn't mean it. Now think about that analogy with Allah. Yes, you should say sorry to the person that you harmed. Of course you should. But you need to, in your own privacy, now go to Allah and say, oh Allah, I made some severe mistakes in my life. This is why, by the way, when it comes to like the levels of harming and making mistakes, when you make a mistake with Allah, you always do tawbah, right? So say, for example, you miss your prayers, you do something in privacy, it doesn't affect other people, you do tawbah, you do istighfar with Allah. When you do any sort of sin that involves another person, there are two layers. You do istighfar with Allah and you also apologize to the person. Just because you make a mistake with a person doesn't render you free of asking Allah for forgiveness. Because you still have to own up to the Khaliq. You have to own up to the one who created that person. That person has ownership over that. Allah has ownership over that person. So at this point, Yusuf, he says, يَغْفِرُ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. You should ask Allah for forgiveness. Why? And this is the last point we'll make inshallah here. Is وَهُوَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. وَهُوَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. He is the most merciful of all those who show mercy. So what is he saying about himself? He's saying here, yeah, I can forgive you, right? I can show you mercy. And I have. لَا تَثْرِيبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْيَوْمِ, right? Like, I'm not going to punish you today. So I'm showing you mercy. But وَهُوَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. Allah is the most merciful and the best of forgivers. When you are forgiven by Allah, it is a forgiveness that is better than any other forgiveness that you can imagine. So I can forgive you, you and me. I can forgive you all you want. But you have to make right with Allah. Because Allah's forgiveness is perfect. My forgiveness will not be perfect. You ever heard the phrase, forgive but don't forget, right? That's the insani mentality, right? The human mentality is, oh, I'll forgive you, right? And that person may have forgiven, right? Like they said sorry to them, and they're like, yeah, no problem, inshallah. It's okay. It happened a long time ago, and I've forgiven you now. But the next time, like you choose to like play ball with some guys, you're like, yeah, I don't want that dude on my team, man. You remember, right? The next time, like you have that friend hang out, and like it's difficult. It's hard. You can forgive, but the tough human experiences, you'll never forget. You'll never forget. That's always a part of you, right? You'll always, oh man, I have that sour experience in my past. So it's hard to forgive perfectly. And that's why in humanity, forgiveness between us will never be perfect. Because perfect forgiveness is what? A wiping away of the sin as though what? It never existed in the first place. And that is only capable by Allah. That's it. One of my teachers gave me a beautiful example. He said, when human beings forgive other people, it's like a pencil that wrote on a piece of paper and then was erased. Yeah, like that initial writing is no longer there, but what can you see? You can see the smudge. You can see some evidence. You can see like a little bit of a line, a little bit of a blur here or there. You can see some sort of evidence that there was some sort of pencil marking there at some point in history. That's the human forgiveness. It's tough. And again, may Allah reward everyone who forgives other people, because it's a very commendable trait. It's a godlike trait to be able to forgive people like that. But there will never be forgiveness like Allah, where when Allah forgives, it's as though that the pencil marker was never there in the first place. It's as though that ink never was there in the first place. It's as though the marking was never even existent in the first place. That's the forgiveness of Allah. So when you go up to Allah and you're standing in front of Allah and you're saying, oh Allah, give me Jannah, give me Jannah, give me Jannah, Allah will, and if Allah has forgiven you, Allah will never bring up something that you've done that He's forgiven you for. Allah will never bring that up, because Allah knows the pain that's associated with it and the pain that's associated with the memory of it. And so Yusuf alayhi salam, he says, وَهُوَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. So go make amends with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the beautiful lesson that I wanted to kind of share with everybody today from the story of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. And then, subhanAllah, beautifully, the surah ends in 111 verses, but you guys can read through verses 93 to 111 of him being united with his father and seeing his father, subhanAllah, after decades of being split apart. But what I wanted you guys to take home today, inshallah, we called this series the stories of sacrifice, right? Sacrifice comes in a lot of different shapes and forms, and sacrifice can sometimes be the sacrifice of your own nafs, the sacrifice of your own kind of human desire to want to do something that's very natural to it. And this sacrifice that he made of literally, and I want you guys to think about trauma, right? Trauma is something that people sometimes never ever, get through. They may go through years of therapy. They may go through years of counseling. They may go through years of remedy. And maybe they will never get over it. But what type of a person must Yusuf alayhi salam have been if he forgave the individuals who literally were the center of his entire ordeal as a prophet in his life? Being split from his father, going through the difficulties. And I'll tell you something, subhanAllah, very interesting. And I'll finish with this, inshallah, which is a true believer. Yes, there is like this kind of human emotion you feel towards the person who is the suspect or the person who is guilty of the crime. But a true Muslim is eventually able to really direct their anger towards shaitan after a while. And I'll tell you what that means. It means hate the sin and not the sinner. Hate the sin and not the sinner. Because after a while, you'll start to realize that the person who did wrong to you, yes, there was no excuse for it, or there still needs to be amends and apologies and forgiveness, but that person is also not tied to that one mistake that they made. That person may also be asking Allah for forgiveness every single day. Just like you and I are with our own mistakes. We're also pleading to Allah to forgive us for something that we may have done 5 years ago, right? And we would hope that a person that we wronged at some point in our lives would be able to look further than just you and me as the originator of that particular sin or mistake. That it was a moment of weakness. It was a moment of humanity that we had that guided us towards something that was incorrect. And ultimately, shaitan, who is the sworn enemy of mankind, who is the one that Allah warned us against, he is the one who truly and unapologetically, without asking for forgiveness, is the one who encourages people towards wrong. I don't believe, subhanAllah, I'll tell you something very honestly, guys. I don't believe that there are any human beings, and outside of certain examples that we very glaringly know today in certain situations overseas, I have a very hard time believing that people that you and me run into every single day are like truly, truly by nature evil people. They're just very mistaken. And they've made some very bad decisions in their life. And perhaps, subhanAllah, us making dua for the people that harmed us is the greatest way for them to be lifted away from their own habits. And our greatest way towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making dua for people that not only do good for us, but also may need our duas and need our forgiveness and also need that little bit of perspective from us, inshallah. Okay? We'll pause there, inshallah, for the day. And inshallah, we will continue next Thursday, bidnillahi ta'ala. I will ask you all's forgiveness. I know we usually do a Thursday post-class Q&A. I just got back into town literally like a couple of hours ago. So I'm going to ask a little bit of pardoning, inshallah, for the Q&A today. And we'll do the Q&A, inshallah, next Thursday. Just because I'll have a little bit more energy and time and thought, inshallah, to be able to put towards the questions. But what I'll ask everyone to do is hold their questions, inshallah. Please don't forget your questions. Hold your questions, inshallah, for today. If you need to write it down, if there's something pressing that you need to ask, inshallah, write it down. And then we'll, inshallah, address it next Thursday after the session's over, bidnillahi ta'ala. Jazakumullah khairan. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to heal anybody in this room that is in pain, whether it be spiritual, physical, mental, emotional. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give shifa kamila. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us for all of our mistakes that we've made in our lives. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us heal from any sort of trauma that we face in our own lives. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to exercise our iman through forgiveness of other people so that we can bring the hearts of people together. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Ameen Rabbil Alameen. Jazakumullah khairan, everybody. Inshallah, if you guys haven't heard, our retreat for this demographic, inshallah, of college students, post-grad students, inshallah, is going to be happening on August 8th, which is not this weekend, but it's inshallah next weekend. So August 8th weekend. If you haven't signed up yet, I really encourage you guys to do so. It'll be inshallah next Friday. It's in a retreat site in Fort Worth, so about 55 minutes away from here, this location here. But obviously, if you live in Irving or Carrollton, it might be a little bit closer for you. But I encourage all you guys to sign up. It's going to be a really kind of emotional weekend, a spiritual weekend, inshallah. We have guest speakers. Mufti Kamani is going to be swinging by, inshallah, over the weekend. Qari Nauman Hussein is going to be swinging by, inshallah. Ustad Fatima Let's going to be swinging by, inshallah. There'll be a lot of great opportunities for that weekend, along with a lot of activities, fun team building stuff, meals, praying together. It's going to be a lot of good times, inshallah. So it'll be Friday night. It'll be Friday starting at 6 p.m. And all the way until Sunday around noon, inshallah. So it'll be 2 nights, overnight stay, inshallah, in the retreat site. So we hope that as many people as y'all can muster up, inshallah, can join us. We only have, I believe, like 20 spots left. So I encourage people, if you want to join in now, inshallah, before the spots run out, because we can't open up more spots because they've already factored in the final number for us. So inshallah, join in if you can, inshallah, for that. And then we have a bonfire coming up, inshallah, this coming Saturday evening. So we'll be doing that here, inshallah, at Roots on Saturday night after Maghrib, inshallah. We'll see you guys there. And also, on Sunday, there's a sisters-only college discussion circle, almost like a roundtable discussion circle on Sunday, inshallah. So if you look on Instagram, you'll see all the programs on their flyers, inshallah. All right? We'll see you guys, inshallah, this weekend and also next Thursday. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.